Welcome back to Joe's Son of Boxing. I hope you're doing well. As you know, we've got the CHRIS EUBANK Jr. versus Conor Benn fight coming up on Saturday. And here's a quirky little anecdote for you, courtesy of CHRIS EUBANK Snr. Because he was interviewed by Spencer Fearon and Tunde Ajayi, and he talked about his own career and, inevitably he was asked about all sorts of things, all those, famous fights he had, especially with Nigel Benn, Steve Collins. He had two with Steve Collins, and he had a very long career, very long, hard, arduous career. The Michael Watson tragedy of sorts, anyway. But he talked about when he went to America. Excuse me. When he went to America, first as an amateur, and I think I'm right in saying he had his first 5 fights in America, professional fights as well. But Senior was saying about how tough it was to go over there and to live over there, and he ended up in the Bronx, and he didn't have a pot to piss in, but it, sharpened him up. It steeled him. It turned him from being a rough diamond into someone who was, at least in terms of technique, more polished. What it actually did to his character was harden it, make it as tough as diamond. But there was one incident that Eubank talked about where he says he got into a physical altercation with Teddy Atlas. And this was over an amateur fight in what Atlas would later remember took place as part of one of the smokers. Now, smokers were, I suppose you'd call them unofficial fights. They were where young fighters, amateurs, would cut their teeth and, again, harden themselves up, sharpen their skills, and sharpen their mental strength and their psychology as much as their physicality. Smokers were very often not that well officiated, shall we say. There were a lot of corners cut. They were very rough and ready. There was a fair bit of illegal gambling went on, that sort of thing. Not everything would be above board. But a lot of fighters took part in smokers because, again, it was a way of introducing you from being a boyish amateur into being a tough, hardened adult fighter. And CHRIS EUBANK had one of these in the Bronx, facing a Teddy Atlas fighter, who Atlas said, he couldn't remember his full name. He said he thought his name was Jose something. But Eubank wasn't happy because Eubank lost the fight. And he accused Atlas of, or Atlas's fighter, of being overweight. He'd come in overweight, and he accused Atlas of knowing full well about this and of actually orchestrating it, that his fighter would come in way above the, I think at the time Chris Senior would have been a 154-pounder, and basically he had a weight advantage, and that's why Eubank Senior lost the fight. And Atlas obviously denied this, wasn't having it. They got into verbal altercation. Chris Senior said that he said, you're a cheat. And then they got into a physical altercation, and Chris said that Teddy Atlas, bit his ear, which is, if that's true, that's rather ironic, considering we know what happened with Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield, and Tyson was trained by Atlas when Atlas was in the Catskills. By this point, Atlas said he'd gone down to New York City to train fighters, and he had a new stable of fighters because he'd left under a bit of a cloud. He left the Catskills, D'Amato's fighters, and he'd gone down to New York City, and he put together his own crew. And now they were, fighting in places like the Bronx. I think Atlas said that the venue was called the Apollo. I'd never heard of it, to be honest with you. But it was a rather, suspect, dingy, sort of rough and ready place where these sort of activities took place. Now, Atlas was asked about this about his memories of this, and this was on his own podcast. Atlas has got his own channel, and you know, he's obviously a very knowledgeable guy, lots of experience. I mean, he must be, what is he, in his early 70s now, Teddy Atlas? But he said he couldn't remember too much about it, but he did have certain recollections. And he said, basically, he said that he does vaguely remember something, but he doesn't remember biting Chris. And he spoke very glowingly of Chris Eubank Sr. He said he was a gentleman, maybe not at that particular point when they were swapping fists, but he said he was, you know, since then he admired what Chris did, you know, with his career and how he conducted himself outside the ring and so on. Atlas estimated that this would have been 43 years ago. So we are talking, we're talking 482, aren't we? 1982. So he didn't have a great recollection of it. But he did say, with regard to weight, he said, in keeping with the rather, let's be kind and call them amateurish facilities, that the weight, the scales were not some high-tech set of scales. It was basically a bathroom scale. He said that Chris would have got on them and then his fighter would have got on them. But there's no way that his fighter would have been, you know, allowed to be considerably heavier than Chris Eubank. Well, all sorts of things went on in smokers, let's put it that way. So I don't know about that. But Atlas did say, you know, we got into it. We had a little bit of a skirmish, I think was the word he used. And he said, but he respected Eubank, because why would Eubank be happy losing a fight? That's what made him a champion. He didn't want to lose fights. He wasn't happy losing fights. You know, if he thought someone was doing him wrong, he was going to put it on him. And Atlas said he could respect that, you know, because that proved the man was a winner. He didn't have that loser's mentality. He wasn't interested in niceties. He was interested in, you know, being the winner, come hell or high water. So that was an interesting little anecdote, I thought. Because when you consider what's going to happen on Saturday, regardless of who you think will win, I think that you know, desperation to be the winner, and don't forget that was an amateur fight that Senior and Atlas were talking about. That desperation to be the winner at all costs, regardless of paychecks, regardless of anything else, to be the winner, that was definitely something that Chris Eubank Sr. had. And we will see if his son, or if indeed Conor Benn has it, on Saturday. Because it's when you come to that crunch moment, like Senior against Michael Watson in their rematch, where Senior was basically outboxed and beaten up by Michael Watson, but never quit. Even when he was floored in the 11th round, what did he do? He got up, landed that Hail Mary uppercut and put Watson over. That type of psyche can't be taught. It's very, very difficult to fabricate that, to manufacture it. And it might well come to pass that on Saturday the winner will be the one that has that the most. Who would that be? We'll wait and see. We haven't got long to wait now, have we? Because it's only a few days away. But yeah, I just thought I'd share that with you in case you haven't seen it. Like I say, the Chris Eubank Senior interview is with Tunde Ajayi and Spencer Fearon. And if you want to watch the Teddy Atlas version of it, his version of or account of what happened, go and have a look on his channel as well. Because it's intriguing, isn't it, hearing these sort of old war stories? I think so, anyway. Anyway, if you like this video, thank you for watching. Hit the like button. You're doing us a big favour by doing that, because they count the likes, apparently. I sort of know why, but they do. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. And yeah, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to reading what you've got to say. I'll get you later. Bye for now.